Hello everyone, and welcome to another horrific chat. In this segment, we chat to horror creators about their. Hello. Uh, this is broken. Oh no.
Uh-oh.
um, this is a great start.
You can always edit this out, right?
Well, we're live, so that's
Oh,
just have to go with it. Where am I? Am I actually? Can you see me on camera?
no, sir, I cannot.
That's fantastic. My camera has completely frozen. This has never happened to me before. So there you go. Right, as long as you can hear me. Hi Mark, welcome to the show. I was here to talk about yourself. Nobody needs to see me anyway. Everyone knows what I look like. The seeing of my ugly
Mm.
mug. How's life treating you?
Life has treated me quite well, actually. I'm doing well here.
Oh, fantastic. So you reached out. You were looking for arc readers for your latest novel, Alpha Male.
Hmm.
So and that's obviously where we sort of got to meet and chat with each other. Um, do you want to tell us a wee bit about the? Sorry, I've completely thrown here because everything's broken. um, yeah, I've noticed. This is your second series you're writing. Is that right?
Yes,
You've
yes, it
currently
is.
two on the go,
Hmm.
and you're going right back to basics with vampires and werewolves, which is always
Yes,
good to see. Back, are you going with the sort of traditional storytelling, right, with the lore and the supernatural element?
I start there, but then I approach the these mythical creatures from a fundamentally different direction. Um, these are characters that would be the villain or the representation of evil in anyone else's story. And what I do is I bring them to center stage, warts and all. They still have claws, they still have fangs, they still are what they are. But then I curse them with a moral compass and I drop them into the middle of dire um, life and death situations where they have to make moral decisions, and they know what they need to do in order to be good men. But as often is the case in real life, knowing what needs to be done and doing it are two different things, because usually the right thing to do is the most difficult thing to do, and it's a lot of times it can be the thing that we dread the most doing. So that makes it interesting for me as a writer to infuse these characters with different aspects of human nature so that they can be relatable to the audience.
Hmm. One thing that has really frustrated me about both vampires and werewolves and zombies as well is it's just the virus. And we've seen over the last, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, this sort of homogenization of various creatures,
Hmm.
particularly vampires and werewolves and zombies. You can hardly tell the difference between them now. And I think it all started with the movie 28 Days Later, with that idea, of them, oh, the zombies move fast now, and they do this and they do that. And we've seen a whole
Hmm.
slew of, and it's come into writing as well. You just see everybody writing the same thing.
Yeah,
Is part of your reason
yeah.
for writing your stories an antithesis of that, or are you even aware of it?
Oh, I was aware of it. I was intensely aware of it. Um, and I share a lot of your frustrations um, with vampires. You often see some permutation of the Romeo and Juliet forbidden love story retold with supernatural creatures. Um, the other thing you see a lot of is the eternally young, eternally beautiful, um, incredibly wealthy, although they have no means of support, vampires who sit around bemoaning the fact that they are vampires and pining away for their lost humanity. And I just said, it's okay for other folks to do that if that's what they want to do. But for me, bag that, dude. I'm going to do something different. So I started with a character who's already been a vampire for about 90 years. And he's a very pragmatic man. He just, well, this is what I am. This is what I have on the plate in front of me. I'm going to try and make the best of this because I have to keep moving on.
Mhm.
And that's how he approaches it. He doesn't sparkle in the sunlight. He looks, because vampires are indeed dead. He doesn't look like a human. He looks like a reanimated walking corpse. His skin is pale and kind of grayish with a slight yellowish tinge to it. The touch of his skin is rather waxy and not elastic the way human skin is.
Mhm.
Um, and his eyes, I describe them because of my medical background. I describe his eyes as being much the same as a cat, and his pupils can open up to completely blacken the entire scleral area of his eyes, so that he can pull in just any tiny little scrap of light that's possible.
Mhm. Is this the Reggie Downing character?
No, Reggie is the human character. The vampire, I simply call him the vampire or
Mhm.
the walking corpse. I mean, it's 2/3 of the way through the book before you ever even learn what his given name was. And I did that on purpose when I was structuring the book. I wanted to create this feeling of otherness, that he keeps himself at arm's length from the affairs of man. He doesn't really want to get just too involved with them. He wants to do his thing, uh, work from home, run his business, and just kind of be left alone. And fate and this author decided, no, sorry, we're going to complicate your life a little bit and see how you do.
I know. Well, it wouldn't be a story otherwise. If everything was just going on, another day at the office,
Yeah.
then we don't have an adventure to go on. Um,
Hmm.
do you think there is a bit too much? We'll go on. We'll start off with because obviously your first book, Nocturnal, that was your first series was the vampire series, isn't that right?
Hmm.
Sort of.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. Um, has there been too much of an attempt to humanize vampires and just make them other characters? The thing that got me was they started making far too many daywalkers. There's too many stories where sunlight doesn't affect vampires. The basics.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah. There's a lot of modern pop culture vampire lore that did not make it into my book. Uh, he does not look human. He wouldn't want to anyway. When he goes out to hunt, he puts on ladies' foundation makeup
Hmm.
to make his skin get a little bit closer to a normal tone, and he wears opaque wraparound sunglasses to cover his eyes because there's nothing he can do about his eyes. They are what they are. And he drives all over San Diego, California doing his vampire stuff and just, living his life.
Hmm.
Um and the few things about vampire mythology, the pop culture stuff that I did bring in, I brought it in because he laughs at it. He thinks it's hysterical,
Hmm.
you know. He talks about how he watches modern vampire movies, and to him, they're like romantic comedies to us. He just finds them ludicrous, you know, because
That's
they're so wrong about, you know, about what being a real vampire is. In fact, the last line of the book is Hollywood never gets it right.
they can't
You
even
know,
get movie making right. I like in Hollywood and now the civil service. They're not creatives anymore. They're civil servants who expect the money just to come in, and they don't have to work for it anymore. And it's been that way for quite a long time. And I think actually
Mhm. Yeah,
Hollywood
I'll
used to
agree with that.
be a hotbed where people got inspired. Now it's the opposite, and you can see that across the board with storytelling. And there's an attempt. It annoys me as well. There's an attempt in horror to sanitize it, to make it
Hmm.
safe, and like especially with vampires and werewolves, that actually hide the monstrosity behind them. Which is to me the whole purpose of the creature. It's the monstrous element of them. They are not human. They're not cuddly toys. They are,
Mm-mm.
you know, they are predators or apex predators. Not to be messed with. But there seems to be a strange thing, and it seems to be these because obviously the more popular stories, but a lot of it's been sort of hijacked and then fluffied up, and I really don't know what I'm reading. Like, there's a lot of things. The last thing I read was like a vampire erotic horror thing, and I couldn't keep a straight face. I was laughing the whole way through it. There was an almost tragic element to it, like it was almost like the monsters, but the monster trying to take themselves seriously, and I don't know what's happened. Where do you think that sort of come from? That idea, or that
Um,
trend, or
I'll tell you where I think it came from. And for those who are watching, I do not adhere to this in my novels, okay? But what I think it is because it is both publishing books and creating films are so expensive to do, and um, there's a lot of risk involved for the studios and for the publishers and all that. They want something that will appeal to as broad an audience as possible. And to do that, they want every horror film or every horror novel to have crossover potential where it goes into the mainstream. And that's the problem right there. Horror is not meant to be mainstream. Horror is supposed to be dark and brooding. It's supposed to be edgy. It's supposed to be defiant. It's supposed to be subversive. Um, in fact, you could actually uh, argue that all art, regardless of genre or medium, is supposed to be edgy and dangerous and subversive. Art is not safe. It's not supposed to be.
yeah, it's this corporatization, the
Yes.
beigeism I call it. Everything's become beige. No,
That's a
no
good way to
hues
put
or
it.
colors allowed. Um, and it really is just sludge. It's horrible. One thing why I like to champion independent creators, because at least if you're independent, you're not beholden to anybody,
Mm-mm.
and at least you
Oh,
have your own voice, and it's just up
yeah.
to people to find it. One thing I find very strange as well is that people seem very reluctant. They'll go and spend money on an overpriced coffee, but they'll not buy an independent horror book for some
Right.
strange reason. It's some sort of fear that, oh, this might be something I don't like. And you're like, well, how do you know? At least if you don't like it, give the book to someone else or donate it or give it to a library. You
Hmm.
spend more on a coffee or on a donut than you would in, say, a book. But this aversion to taking a chance on. It's, I don't know what it is about the label independent, because it
I'll
just
tell
means
you
not
what it is.
affiliated with a huge company. That's all it means.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what it is. At least for as independent novelist, um, we used to be called self-published, and in the early days of self-publishing, when it was still brand new, um, it became a haven for people who just weren't really that good. A lot of unedited stories got uploaded and published, and so the stigma came up that, well, if your books were any good, you'd have an agent and you'd be published by one of the big publishers in New York or London or someplace
Mhm.
like that. And luckily, that stigma is starting to fade. It at least certainly it has faded in the horror community. Um, most of the authors I read are indie horror authors, and they're quite good. Uh, some of them are as good as me. Some of them are better than me. A lot of times, uh, I read their books going, "Damn it, why didn't I do this?" You know.
Yep.
Um, every once in a while, I'll come across a stinker, a clunker, or something that maybe needed one more polish on it, one more pass with a beta reader or an editor before it went out. And those I just donate them to my local charity. I don't know what you guys have over there, but here in the United States, we have a thing called Goodwill Industries.
Yeah, with loads that
Oh, okay.
loads of organizations doing loads of things. There's
Yeah. And they operate these thrift stores, and they do job training for the homeless and for the mentally and emotionally developmentally disabled people. They teach them the basics of job performance and all that, and it's very valuable work. So um, by and large, whenever I have anything that I don't need anymore, I donate it to Goodwill, because they're going to sell it, and then they're going to use the money to help continue the job training, for the disabled. And I'm all for that.
I actually do it with Horrific Publishing. Any of the like off prints. So normally before the book's published, I'll get one sent. I don't do the what do you call it, the proofread, or rather wait and get it what it's like, because I don't like that little
Hmm.
band across the middle. I want to see the thing full. But those say they don't turn it right, well, they just get donated, and at least it's out there. Somebody can pick it up for pennies, and maybe if they can't afford to buy it online, at least they get a chance to read it and get to see the authors as well that take part. Yeah, it's there's always ways to sort of, I don't know, without sounding very fluffy or condescending, you can do a wee bit of good in the world. You don't have to preach about it. You don't
Mm-mm.
have to wave your
It's better
flag or
if you
whatever.
don't.
You just crack
It's
on.
better if you don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
you let your actions speak for themselves.
I'm always a big believer in that. Just you crack on, get on. You know where you're heading. You know what you stand for, and just get on with it. I'm very wary of people that feel they need to preach. It doesn't matter what it's about.
Yeah,
And someone who's
yeah.
preaching too hard has something to hide, if that makes sense. And I was very wary of folks like that. And they have to tell you, I did a good thing today. I did a good thing. Why? What are the 10 bad things you did? I always worry about that. But then again, horror stories, you usually see that sort of person has people chained to their radiators in their basement. That's the warning, isn't it? Horror is always the warning of, certain behaviors. It's the idea is that from the campfires, of watch out for the beasts in the woods. It was to keep children safe, keep people safe. That's how it communicated, and it's no different.
Yes. I agree. I agree. and horror has been with us as human beings, um, pretty much since the time that our ancestors climbed down out of the trees. The first stories, the first oral history that cavemen talked about around the cook fire at night was, oh, don't go over there, you're going to get killed. Yeah, you don't want to go in that direction either. There's monsters there,
Mhm.
and they'll eat you alive. And of course, what they may have been talking about was some early ancestor of what we would now call a mountain lion or a jaguar.
Yeah.
You know,
Bobcat or just some sort of
but
apex
to
predator.
them, yeah, but to them it was a monster because suddenly the early humans, were not top of the food chain. You know, but you had mentioned something earlier that struck a chord, talking about how pop culture in recent years has kind of defanged vampires.
Mhm.
And I agree with that. The final straw for me was Twilight. I didn't read any of the books. I saw the first movie, and that was it. And I only saw it one time, and that was it. That was not, because basically what you had there was Romeo and Juliet aimed at 13 and 14-year-old girls, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that per se. But for what I look for, when it's time to watch a supposed horror movie with vampires in it, that was not it. I mean, they didn't even have fangs.
Yeah, it was a
And
bit ridiculous. I
and the
did read the books.
glowing,
I'll
sparkling and glowing in the
Yep.
sunlight and all this kind of stuff. Not for me. And I felt in fact, I was elated when a movie came out that was the total complete opposite of that. A little gem that I recommend highly called 30 Days of
Oh,
Night.
yes. No God.
Yes, exactly.
I was gonna
And
say that was right in the tip of my when you get absolutely disgusted with Twilight, you go 30 Days of Night, and that is just visceral, like
yes.
unapologetic, no messing about.
Yeah, and
Oh,
and
hey
that's what I
Chris.
was trying. Hey guys, that's what I was trying to do when I wrote Nocturnal.
Mhm.
30 Days of Night, just the tone and the mood was a huge influence on me, and just the absolute monstrous things that my vampire does, and he does some horrific things. But what you have to look at least in my novel, is you have to look to the subtext and ask yourself, why is he doing this? You know, and as strange as it may seem for those who haven't read my work, in my vampire series, my vampire is doing everything out of love. Even the monstrous, horrific things when he's, ripping people's arms out at the socket and beating them over the head with their own severed arm, and he's doing it uh, out of love for someone that he wants to protect at all costs. And these people present an existential threat to these people that he's trying to protect.
Mhm.
And he's just a guy that he goes from zero to high order violence in about, a quarter of a second. That's all it takes for him.
But is that not like dealing with any apex predator? I watch a lot of when I'm cleansing the palate
Mhm.
between the horror movies. I watch animal sanctuary vlogs, especially some of the ones in Florida where people are dealing with gators.
Yes.
And I've always said I'm an idiot. I would die because I want to pet the puppy. Doesn't matter whether the puppy's going to rip my arm off. I want to pet it. But I see the fact
Yeah.
that they can turn like that. just from placid, still not even moving to taking down something. Nile crocodiles, if you watch them, they're brutal. So it doesn't lessen them as a creature. That it doesn't mean you have to hate them or you just have to respect them.
Yeah.
And I always saw that with vampires. They're an apex predator, and it doesn't. This is where the Blade series, if you remember back in the day, like the first movie is amazing,
Mhm.
but the whole idea that every vampire just wants to wipe out humanity, it's like that's like going and seeing a herd of cattle. Go, I hate that little cattle. I'll go and wipe them all out because I can. It's stupid, And there's too many of those movies, I think, as well, where the vampire is just idiotic
Well, I
and
mean,
can't
if the
control
only
its.
creatures on, if you kill all the humans and you have a planet of vampires, now what are they going to eat?
Yeah.
What's their food source? You know, it just, yeah, that kind of stuff, which is why in my werewolf series, where I took a kind of a different, what I hope is a unique approach to the werewolf mythos. In the first book, my main baddie um, wants to take over the human race. He doesn't want to kill them all. He wants to take over, and he wants to butcher about half the human race, about 4 billion people, and the survivors are going to be herded and enslaved for work and for maintenance and for food and for sport, for sex and that kind of thing. And then the werewolves are going to establish themselves as the dominant species on the planet and have the surviving humans worship them as gods. That's what he wants. Because in my story, in my alternate parallel history here, there was a time when werewolves were worshipped as gods, and they've never forgotten that. You
Mhm.
know, they slipped into the realm of legends and campfire tales and ghost stories and all that, and they've he and the people that think like him think that they have been reduced to cheap boogeymen, and he wants to change that. That's his goal. That's his agenda. And then there's a my main character, Caleb Jacobson. He comes along and he finds out about what's happening because he's not a member of any pack,
Mhm.
and he's just horrified by this. And then Hans tries to recruit him. That doesn't work, and one thing leads to another, and then it gets personal for Caleb. They make it personal for him to where he says, "Okay, you want to dance? We're going to dance." And I'm a good dancer. and and then things go from there. And you know, he, mostly he just wants to be left alone, and mind his own business. But when he sees the enormity of the evil in this plan, he cannot, in good conscience, sit aside and do nothing.
Yeah, one thing I've found is the werewolf story is still. Yeah, there's been some goofy stuff out there, like the Howling series. First one was great, then the sequels were just tragic. Um, but at least the werewolf has managed to still maintain a bit of its aura. Um, like some of the best movies, American Werewolf in London, Dog Soldiers, uh,
Mhm.
even the Underworld series to a point. It got a bit goofy towards the end, but like the initial premise did not shy away from what werewolves were.
Right.
And I think when it changed, like the original, if you think back to the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr., and
Mm.
even American Werewolf in London, they were individual creatures. They were individually cursed. But
Yeah.
when the concept of the pack came in, that completely, it always is. Obviously, wolves run in packs, but the idea of the werewolf pack came into being, that really changed the genre and it brought a whole new dynamic to it. Do you think that maybe refreshed the genre compared to vampires? Vampires never had that refreshment of late. The
Yeah,
vampires
I
genres
do.
kind of went a bit stale, but werewolf, because of the pack dynamic, you can have so much in it, and you can have
Right, because
interpack rivalry.
you can take different characters and apply different aspects of human nature and different facets of human personalities into them, so that there can be conflict and tension between between the characters, so that you have that dramatic dynamic, so that story wise you can do something with it.
Yep. Basically, Dale, Mark's awesome. This just outshone me. Once we went live, I didn't hold a candle to him, so he just outshone me completely. So I'm paled in comparison, which is rightly so. That's what happens when I get good guests on. I just fade into the background. I don't know. I got completely thrown. The thing went wibble. Once we went live, the thing went wibble, and we just got to go with it. So you all know what I look like anyway. For flip's sake.
But yeah, I tried to keep. I wanted to make my werewolves dangerous, and I did this with my vampire too.
Hmm.
I wanted to make them dangerous in a way that I personally had not ever seen before. See, when I sit down to write a book, I write the book that I would be willing to spend money on to buy so I could read it. So I'm trying to write a story that's enough to knock my own boots off.
Hmm.
And if I can do that, then hopefully I can bring my reading audience along for that ride. But like my vampire, and I'm not really giving anything away here. My vampire will only hunt criminals. He has a deep, burning, passionate hatred for criminals. And because he is a vampire, he can see people's auras. He can see these glows, these different colors kind of emanating off of people. And he can tell instinctively um, who is good and who is bad. And if he can touch them, and it's not enough to grab somebody by the sleeve, he has to actually touch his skin to theirs.
Hmm.
But if he can touch them, just like that, he can see completely into their soul. He knows everything about them just in that instant. And he'll know whether they're a good person or whether they're a low-life scumbag. And if they're a low-life scumbag, whew, man, God help them having come across him, because he's not just going to bite you on the neck and, no, 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 no. Oh, no, no. This guy's going to twist your head around 180 degrees, rip it off your body at the neck, pick your quivering corpse up, lift it up over his head, and dump it on himself. He is going to bathe in your blood while he drinks it. So he's not he's a messy eater.
That's
And
that is a trope
he
I find
he he
hilarious.
he just yeah, he hates them, and he wants to kill them in such a way that they do not come back as someone like him. He doesn't want them back.
Mhm.
If he kills them, he wants them to be dead forever.
So, are you going along with just the vampire's bite is enough to turn another vampire? and with the werewolf, or have you went with the sort of ritualistic aspect of like turning vampires, creating another vampire is a major process?
Um, he again, I bring my medical and my scientific background
Hmm.
to it. There's some type of an enzyme in his saliva, and he doesn't understand it. In fact, whenever someone asks him a question, the few people who know what he is, if they ask him a question and it's about him and what makes him what he is, if he doesn't know the answer, he'll just smile behind his sunglasses and say, "It's just the magic of being a vampire."
Hmm.
And so he doesn't always know, but I talk about there are certain enzymes and proteins in his saliva that if he bites someone and purposefully mingles his saliva with them, and he has to do it before they die. Okay, that's the thing. He has to do it before they die. Um, then they will wake up the very next evening. They'll wake up the next evening and they are like him, you know. But he, and at least at the time of the first novel, the events of the first novel, he's never made a vampire in 90 years. He's never made another one like him. He's never felt the need for it,
Hmm.
you know.
No, that's what I mean, because
Yeah.
there's two trains of thought. There's the creating another vampire is a very stringent, controlled. It must be approved by the hierarchy. You must be a vampire of certain standing before you do it. Don't
Oh,
turn children, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the other train of thought where, once again, that's this homogenization between the zombie and the werewolf that everybody gets bit, everybody turns, and it's almost instantaneous. But the ones that get created are never quite the same. They're mindless beasts. God, what was that movie I reviewed about 2 years ago? It was set in an airplane, Red Eye or something. It's about vampires.
oh yeah, I saw
It
that.
was
I
horrible.
wanted to like it. I didn't really
It
like it.
was awful, and you couldn't be in the side of anybody. It was one of them movies where you just didn't care. Okay, yeah, they're all getting wiped out. Yeah, okay, right. So when she bites them, they become a zombie, and this is back to that. That was the peak where I really got this um idea of the homogenization. That, hold on, it's supposed to be a vampire, but it's okay in sunlight, because I think it was in that movie, and the ones that were bitten are acting like zombies, and they look almost like they've got claws like werewolves. What's happening here? Like, do they not know what they're making? I
Yeah.
think that's the point. It was that movie, I think, really brought it to me that maybe it's too much of the people trying to go scientific. It's okay bringing a bit of it in, but werewolves and vampires are supernatural creatures in my mind,
Hmm.
and that
They are
idea
what they
of
are.
magic, of curses, of even the whether you practice or not, even the religious aspect of the aversion to certain religious symbols, etc. Um, to me, that was part of the mythos. It's the limitations as well. What's the point in having a creature or a person with powers if there aren't any limitations? Because then you've nothing
Yeah.
to work with, you know.
Yeah, the characters, the monsters have to have certain limits. There have to be downsides to being what they are. In my vampire stories, and I really bring it out in the second book, Just Before Dawn. Um, Vampires, at least in the world that I've created, and now it's a rule that I'm going to have to follow, as I write future stories. When dawn comes, vampires die, and they can feel it coming on as the sky begins to lighten and the black turns to blue. They get tired, they can't think, their joints get stiff. Um, they start to feel nauseous, they have pain, um, and want they have to get, someplace dark because they cannot be exposed to sunlight.
Mhm.
And you find in my second book, in Just Before Dawn, you find out what happens to a vampire in my stories if they get exposed to sunlight. And all I can tell you is it ain't pretty because they don't sparkle. Okay. They just don't.
They go woof. No, but
Well,
that's
they,
rightly. What's
yeah,
the point of
it,
the monster? You can have all the powers of the monster, but if you don't have the limitation, A,
yeah,
the character, the actual antagonist, whether you set them as a protagonist or antagonist, they have nothing to work with. They've no rules to follow. They've no things to watch out for. You know,
right.
if they're just
Yeah.
omnipotent. Daywalkers really annoyed me as a story because it just felt so bland.
Daywalkers, I don't
It's
even consider Daywalkers to be a horror movie.
it was more like a political
That's
drama
an
or something. It
action.
was
Yeah, it was a political drama, and it was an action film. The fact that there were vampires in it almost seems like it was just something they threw in at the last minute.
yeah.
They just, eh.
I know, and I'm just like, yeah.
And it had such a marvelous cast, and that was another film that I wanted to like it. I'm a huge fan of Sam Neill. I will watch anything that man is in,
Oh God.
and it
Can you
just
understand what
the movie
Possession's about?
just fell flat.
Can you understand the movie Possession?
Mm.
That was
It can
his.
have something. It can have something to say. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm looking for some deep philosophical message every
No, I
time I
just
go
mean
to
the
watch a movie.
storyline. It was Sam Neill overacting, like going 90 to a dozen, and the
Uh,
thing was just an absolute train wreck. It was fascinating to watch. Same as In the Mouth of Madness and all. He's done some
mm,
really out there movies. I don't. Everyone thinks he's a
yeah,
stoic actor, in his later years, but in his younger days, he did some crazy films.
yeah. The first time I saw Sam Neill in a movie would have been maybe 1979, 1980. I know it was right after I got out of boot camp when I first joined the Navy. Um, he was in The Omen 3, the third one,
A
where
lot of people don't
Damien
know that.
had grown into adulthood, and Sam Neill, who was unknown at that time, I had never heard of him. You know, I was only like 18, 19 years old at the time, and but man, what a knockout performance! I mean, he just knocked it out of the park, and he was a young man at the
Mhm.
time. Um, he couldn't have been more than maybe 28, 30 years old, you know? And he, like I said, he just knocked that performance out of the park. And I've been watching him and stuff ever since. And that's been what, 45 years.
Mhm.
And I'm still watching him, you know.
Yeah, but some of his earlier movies, just he wasn't afraid. He reminds me a bit like Nicolas Cage now, that he'll be in the blockbuster, but he also be in this like crazy independent movie
Yeah.
that makes no, it's not palatable to the audiences that watch it and go, "What is this?" But I don't think he cares, and that
Well,
you
he's
can't
not
you can't
afraid to
help but
take
respect someone like
artistic
that.
chances.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not afraid of it. He's about the job, and especially in the horror genre, he's really prominent in the horror genre. And oh god, Event Horizon, like that's an absolute classic of a movie, in my opinion.
There you go.
Like, and if
Now
it
now
wasn't for
we're
Sam
talking.
Neill's performance, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. If it hadn't been for Sam Neill's performance, that movie would have had a completely different tone and tenor to it than what it did. He grounded a lot of the really fantastical elements of that story because at any point in that movie, they threatened to just completely take over. And he was able to ground everything.
Yep. What do you mean ignore me? Flipping Dale's a cheeky one. Flips too.
Oh, she's just saying that she'll watch anything with him in it too.
So, but I'm just making the point that he's not afraid to go out. He was never afraid, and still isn't, to just do those random, absolutely bonkers projects. That, if he was a typical Hollywood person, or worried about his stardom, he would go for all the safe roles. But he's never done that.
Right. And I have a lot of respect for actors like that. It doesn't mean that I have to like every movie they're in. I've seen movies where actors give great performances and the movie still fails. And it could be the writing, it could be the directing, it might be some of the other characters. There's so many things that have to blend just right for a movie to work. And like, for instance, there was a movie made many years back called The Number 23. And it was this really dark psychological thriller that kind of teetered on the edge of psychological horror. And it starred, believe it or not, this movie starred Jim Carrey. The same guy that played Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and was in The Mask and Liar Liar, all these broad slapstick
He's done a couple of
comedies.
movies like that. There's a Polish one as well he was in.
Dark Crimes.
Yes.
Yeah. And in both times, whatever problems those movies had, they had nothing to do with Jim Carrey. And they had nothing to do with his performance. That man could have been another Robin Williams, someone who could just simply come into pretty much any genre of film, comedy, drama, a thriller, science fiction. I mean, he could come in and do anything. For some reason, people would accept Robin Williams going from one type of role to another and bouncing back and forth. But when Jim Carrey tried it, and he tried it 2 or 3 different times, the movies tanked. And they most of them got critical drubbings here in America too. And it's like over here, and this is something with American audiences that just drives me insane. They want him to be pratfall comedy every single time. They want him to be Ace Ventura every time. They want him to be Yes Man every single time. And I understand where that comes from. And
it's a very childish mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, it's his talent, but he's a performer just like any other performer. He wants the freedom, the creative freedom, to be able to try all kinds of different things. And here in America, at least, anything that was firmly set outside of comedy did not work very well as far as being profitable. If the movies had been profitable, it probably would have been a different story. And that's too bad. Now Carrey is in semi-retirement now. He's only coming out of retirement every once in a while to collect a paycheck. And those are his words, not mine.
No, that's actually at least being honest about it. Flip, when you talk about Robin Williams, 1 Hour Photo is still one of the most intense movies I've ever watched, even though there's no actual gore or violence in it. That's still I think that's one
Yes,
of his strongest performances.
chilling, chilling. Another performance of his was in a movie he did with Al Pacino. It was set up in Alaska called Insomnia.
Don't remember that one.
I advise you to
Hmm.
look look it up. It's called Insomnia, and uh, he plays a really, really, really creepy guy in that.
Yeah, it was such a shame what happened to him. Like, it
Yeah,
goes to show we never know. It's always the ones put on a brave face.
yeah.
Yeah,
You just never know what someone else is going through, and because they'll, it's like he said before he died, people don't fake being ill, they fake being okay, you know. And it's true. I believe that, and you just don't know. And I just try to be kind, show respect to people, and if I can't do that, I'll prop more often than not. It just means I'll keep my mouth shut and stay out of the situation completely, because uh, I do believe that what I put out there is what I'm going to get back, and um, both for moral reasons and for professional reasons too. Um, I conduct myself a certain way when I'm in public because I don't want to alienate my readers, and I don't want to alienate any potential readers who have not discovered me yet, you know? And I want them to be able to read one of my novels and say, yeah, this guy's a good writer, rather than, oh, yeah, yeah, he can write, but this guy's a dick, you know? I don't want that. I mean, why would any artist or anyone who depends on the public for their career, why would we want to alienate anybody, you know?
do you think there's a certain mindset of this? I think it's to do with the social media era, and probably like yourself, I grew up pre-internet,
Yes.
discovered the internet, obviously, and then social media was a different era as well after the internet. If that makes sense, um, it's completely different. But people get caught up in the idea of going viral and to be seen for being seen sake. You see it with like B list and C list celebrities. They have to go for
Yes, the
controversy because
celebrities who are
it's,
famous for being famous.
yeah,
Yeah.
they don't actually do anything, but they have to keep their name in the zeitgeist, and the only way they can do that is to poke at people, to get a reaction, and
Yeah.
go through that whole. It's very tiring. I find it boring, and you do see a bit of that in independent writers, and not so much in horror. Horror's the one thing I've noticed about the horror genre, and why will always be a lifelong fan. There's more of a spirit of collaboration in horror, but if you go into like generic writing groups, or
Hmm.
something I want to talk about as well is obviously you come from filmmaking background as well, but definitely in writing groups that are not horror centric, the backstabbing and the people trying to build up a hierarchy and push others down is absolutely ridiculous. Is that a
Yeah.
massive sense of insecurity it comes from, or is it just um is it people going to their base instincts, or
I
what do you
think
reckon it
I
is
think
that
it's
behavior?
I think it's insecurity. They see these other writers as their competition. They may see the other writers as a threat. Uh, they may recognize that maybe the writer that they're sniping at is better than they are. Maybe the mechanics of their writing is better. Maybe maybe they have a talent in certain aspects of writing a book that maybe the other person doesn't have. see, my thought, I belong to a writing group. I live in northwestern Washington state here in the United States.
Hmm.
We refer to it as the Pacific Northwest. And those of us who've lived here a while, we just call it the PNW, you know. And I belong to a writers group here. And the reason I'm with them and have stayed with them since I moved up here in 2016 is because everyone there, no matter what, um, no matter what genre they write in, no matter where they are in their career, whether they're even published or not, we're all supportive and encouraging of each other. The sniping that just simply does not happen. And the fellow that runs the group, people who get too unruly and cannot be uh, throttled back, if they can't
Hmm.
bring themselves back down, um, he'll throw them out of the group. He's thrown. I can think of 3 people over the what 9 years or so that I've lived up here. I can think of 3 people that he just threw them out of the group, said to hell with you. Go do your own thing somewhere else. You're not doing it here, and you are no longer welcome here because you are a disruptive, destructive force for the rest of us. And he's got absolutely no hesitation to do that to people. Is he'll try to warn them, no, this is what we do here. We don't want to get into any of that. We don't want this negativity. We have other things we're trying to accomplish here. And he'll try that 2 or 3 times with them, and if they just do not get it, then he will invite them to not come back
Hmm.
and to seek life elsewhere than in our group. And I've got a lot of respect for him for that.
That's actually Dale in the chat there with her Horror Central group. There are what 40,000 members now, in the group, and she is stringent. She will not. Once somebody starts causing trouble, they're done. You know, and that I think it takes that one person to just have that no nonsense approach, because the minute you let
Yeah.
that sort of in, like there's no getting rid of it. And it does
Yeah.
actually. What Chris is asking here,
Have I
it affects
noticed a
storytelling.
change? I'm looking at what Chris just
Mm.
wrote here. Has Mark noticed a change in horror movies in the last few years? I feel like there is a slow return to better stories and less messaging. Um, yeah, there are movies that we are seeing that return to classic horror storytelling, using the classic structural devices and the classic structure of the stories and everything. And yeah, we are slowly but surely getting back to what I call the hardcore horror. Um, Colin and I were talking earlier about um, the declawing and the defanging of horror characters.
Mhm.
And at least here in the United States, and I can't speak for the rest of the world, but here in the United States, um, there's been a lot of movies, horror and otherwise, that were written and shot to push a certain political or social agenda. And that's okay in as far as it goes, because all art is political, because all art reflects the society at large in which it is created. Um, the problem comes when the message becomes more important than the story. People sometimes forget in this business that our first job, our first responsibility, first and foremost, is to entertain our audience, to thrill them, to provide escapism for them, to provide them a relief from their day-to-day cares and struggles. Now, if we can talk to them about other things, which I do,
You
believe
mean
me,
subtext?
I live and breathe in the subtext. Read any of my books and my vampires and my werewolves. I'm not really talking about vampires and werewolves. They are the window dressing.
The vehicle, the
The blood,
storytelling vehicle.
yeah. The blood and the gore and the vampires and werewolves and the sex and the nudity and all this other crazy stuff I have, that's just the window dressing to draw people in. And then once I get them in and I have them turning the pages, then I want to talk to them about other things that I believe are important to me. And I do have certain recurring themes that do tend to come up in every book I write. But each book will have something unique to it in the subtext that I try to bring in. But you can't beat people over the head with your message, because if people want to be preached at, they'll go to church. People do not want to be talked at. They don't mind being talked to, but they don't want to be talked at. They do not want to be beat over the head with what you think.
Yeah, whether you
They
agree or
want to
not,
think for
that's a.
themselves.
I found that a lot of people, if there's something you might agree with on a certain issue, and they are really obnoxious, that's the best way to convert you to the other side of the argument. Because when somebody's just being an absolute idiot, and then they're destroying something that you love as well, like um, I saw this the last attempt, like it has really not caught on. Other franchises, other genres have been destroyed, but it never really landed with horror because horror is a completely different beast. And a lot of people forgot about that. Let's take Jordan Peele, for example, Candyman.
Hmm.
Everyone jumped in the bandwagon. Oh, he's doing this, he's doing that. But at the end of the day, he did the one actor who I absolutely adore and miss now, Tony Todd. He did him dirty in that movie.
Yes, I
So how can
believe
you
so too.
preach? How can you preach a certain thing to be empowering certain people, and you do the father of that franchise, because Tony Todd made the Candyman franchise, and you do
Oh
him
yeah.
dirty the way he did in that movie? You know, you lost your argument there. They tried it again with Hellraiser, and they tried calling people
Oh
names.
man.
If you've read Clive Barker, and if you're a fan of Clive Barker, you're not an esthenophobe.
Yeah, I'm a huge
Spit or
fan of
blood,
Clive
your
Barker.
choice. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Scarlet
Yep.
Gospels, spit or blood, your
Yep.
choice. My favorite line in any book. Like, there's no messing about.
Yeah.
Like, and these people have
Yeah.
come in. God, what do you call that other idiot? David Gordon Green. He's another one. They've
Oh,
now
don't get me
vanished.
started on him. Oh, please don't
Oh,
get me started on him.
I'm waiting for another voodoo doll so he can join Ridley here, Uncle Ridley, because this is my crap directors going to be my crap directors thing, getting a set of gallows put up. He's another one. He didn't just do it with one franchise, but he did it with two. You're like, go away, you absolute muppet. And then you got ones just bringing these tired tropes from other genres. Five Nights at Freddy's, sure they did it. They brought that guy in from the Hunger Games, Mr. Sourface, he looks like a bulldog chewing a wasp, never happy. And you couldn't get with him as a
I
protagonist.
I never saw Five Nights at Freddy's because it just what the early stuff that I'd read in the trades about it over here, and the key art and the other stuff, it it just did not look like the kind of horror that I seek out.
Yeah, well, sometimes as a reviewer, you don't have a choice. You have to go and watch
Right.
the thing.
Right.
You gotta go and
Which is
review the thing.
why I'm not a reviewer.
Sometimes, oh god, this is coming out now. Oh god, I gotta go and watch it.
But let's see, what are some of
Yeah.
the others folks saying?
Um,
Horror Writers Association is a dangerous
that's an
group.
interesting one because you're part of the Horror
It's-
Writers Association, aren't you? Is
Yes,
it
I
as a
am.
whole or is it chapter by chapter? Because I know what Dale's talking about. There are
It's
some.
both. The only reason that I'm still in it is because of the local chapter here close to here, based in Seattle.
Mhm.
They're really good people. They're
Oh,
talented
Brianna's
writers.
group.
I'm sorry?
Brianna Malucky's group.
Yes. And
No, I know Brianna quite well. She's been on this.
you know,
Loads of time.
they're good
You do know
people.
I'm friends with those guys.
Mhm. Yeah.
Is that how you found the
The
channel?
problem No, I've met them because I align myself with the Seattle chapter since it's the
Yeah,
closest
but you
one
know I've
to
had
me.
the Seattle chapter members on this podcast loads of times.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, I'll have Brianna on and it
No,
features some of their
I'm gonna have
stories.
to go back and I'm
All
gonna have to
right,
go back
I
into
held a
your
workshop
archives
here
and
for
look for it.
reviewers, how to be a reviewer.
Mhm.
Oh, I thought I was joining the dots there, how we sort of came into each other's radars. Yeah, I know the Seattle chapter quite well. In fact, that's where I'd argue they're an exception to the rule.
Well, the only reason I'm still in the Horror Writers Association is because of the local people here. I like them.
Hmm.
The national level, um, man, I've just seen scandal after scandal happen in the 3 years or so that I've been a member. And being an ex-military man, I know something about leadership because I was literally sent to schools and trained in how to be a good leader, right?
Duty
And
of care.
when you're talking about the national presidents and the vice presidents and all the various chairs and stuff, those are leadership positions. And you better have some leadership skills if you're going to do that job and do it well. And I have yet to see the national leadership really step up and take firm stands on things and provide strong leadership for the organization. Um, I see a question here from Dell. What do you guys think about the Neil Gaiman
Oh,
raping
Neil
multiple
Gaiman. Yep.
women? What does it say?
They did. They
I,
did
I,
have him
I'm
on a
a
pedestal.
yeah. Well, they put him on a pedestal because he's one of those marquee writers. He gets big pushes in marketing by his publishers, and he's written some great stuff. I'm not going to take anything away from his
Beware the male
talent.
feminist. I've always said that.
Yeah, he as far as these allegations, um, I don't know, but because I don't know the guy, I don't know anything about him. I've read a couple of his books. That's all I know. Um, when you get one allegation, that's bad enough, and you have to defend yourself. But when you start getting several of them, and they're piling up, where the timeline is years of a pattern of behavior, that's when you start going, because if he's guilty of what they say he is, he is the kind of creep that gives all men a bad name. People who use their positions to take advantage of women, these things are hard enough between the sexes anyway. Things are hard enough to build and maintain relationships and to build the trust and the respect that has to be there for a relationship to last. And guys that engage in this kind of behavior, I can't call them men because men don't act this way. Guys do, men do not. Because men have a backbone and men have a moral compass, and they use their moral compass to guide them through their lives. But guys that do this kind of thing, they just undermine everything in the relations between women and men. And if he can be proven guilty, then he gets what he gets, and he gets what he gets, and if he winds up going away, then bye, good riddance.
I'm very against trial by social media on anything. That's why I
too.
tend not to cover topics like this. There's a lot of I would probably have 10 times the amount of subscribers if I jumped on the clickbait stuff. But I'm very much of court trial hasn't happened. Nobody's been convicted.
Right.
This is all blah blah blah. And how many times has that been proven not to be the case? Kevin Spacey's a good example, actually. Stuff he was accused of.
I think Kevin Spacey just got away with it.
Well, once again, it came down to
just because he was acquitted doesn't mean he didn't do it.
But
it means they could not prove it in a court of law.
But again, it's one of them things that then you have to either take it, you either trust the system or you don't.
Right.
Which has been
here's the
thing
problem
about
with the
messages and stuff.
system.
People have been quick, I don't like you, I'm gonna sully your reputation, I'm gonna do this and being invited. We do not want to live in that society. We've seen that where somebody just starts something online completely unfounded and people's lives are destroyed. I don't want that. It's horrible.
It happens. The guilty until proven innocent thing, that whole mentality just does not fly with me. It's not how I was raised. It's not what I was raised to believe. But if you're found guilty of something, then too bad, so sad. Like I said, whatever punishment you get, you deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
So be a man, be a real man, and have some values, have some morals, and avoid something that was popular over here about 30 years ago, the term situational ethics. Situational ethics. Yeah, sorry, I got to holler BS on that. The only situational ethics that I've ever seen in my life where it was justified was back in my military days when we were in theaters of combat overseas, where ordinarily it's not a good thing to kill another human being. But when you're in combat, when you're in a war zone, not only is it okay, it's rather actively encouraged, But, getting back to the real world where we are now, no, you either have your moral compass or you don't. And if you don't have one, you need to get one. And, for all these sexual predators like the Harvey Weinsteins and the Neil Gaimans and stuff like that, assuming Neil Gaiman is guilty, and it's looking pretty bad for him right now.
That's what I mean. Once it's decided and it comes to light, fair enough. I'm all about it. I'm no fan. I'm not a fan of Neil Gaiman anyway. I don't find his work inspiring. The Sandman series is just boring. I just don't appreciate him as a writer. The only thing he did was Good Omens because I was a Terry Pratchett fan. It's the only good thing I've seen him part of, But at the same time, That's why I don't get involved in stuff like this, because it's so easy to jump on bandwagons these days. There's always a bandwagon going past wanting you to
Yeah.
jump on, and you look rather silly when you do if you haven't at least stopped the research or have a look. If you've actually got an interest in it, stop research, look at the things, and wait for actual evidence to be presented.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
there's too much of this today. Of, like I said, just everyone's like, "Oh, I don't like them, so now we're going to destroy their lives," and this is back to what I was alluding to in the writers' circle. There's people who've tried to do that, the other writers, because they're getting a bit of traction.
Hmm.
Cam was Navy.
Say again.
No, just Dale said you're both in the army. So Cam was Navy.
Yeah, I was in the United States Navy. I was assigned to United States Marine Corps combat units to provide medical support for them,
So, what is your
and
favorite
that's
flavored crayon anyway? Did you get a? Did you get one at the end of the day?
my favorite crayon was cinnamon red. That was the one I liked. Yeah,
That joke never
but
gets old.
no, it doesn't. It really doesn't. But yeah, it yeah, I have learned to really kind of try and hold back and reserve judgment and let everything play out in court rather than the court of public opinion. Um, Now, does that mean I have preconceived ideas and preconceived
Well, we all
notions of
do.
what I
That's we're
think is going to
human. You know
happen?
what I mean?
Of course. I just choose to keep most of it to myself until until everything comes out in a court of law.
Yeah, I could say this turned out to be one massive smear campaign. Just saying, hypothetically.
Yeah.
And we have jumped in the bandwagon. We went blah 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 blah. Then we look a bit silly, don't we? And then you have two choices. You either have to accept a bit of humility, whoops, or this is what cracks me up. And it's a very American thing. Everyone doubles down, even if you're wrong. It's like I cannot lose face,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
so. I mean, you just can't deal with
And
someone because
and the thing is, people will respect you more if when you're proven wrong to have the backbone to say, you know what, I was wrong. This what I thought was true is not true. I'm wrong. And people will two things will happen. Either people will have respect for you for admitting that you're wrong, or it will at least diffuse the controversy enough that people are going to forget about the controversy and forget about your stance in it within, a very, very short amount of time, just a
mhm.
few weeks to a few months. People are going to forget because, like you said, there's always another train going by that they want people to jump on, you know. So,
A lot of this
but
goes on, and it really does detract though from the basics of people have used these to mask bad storytelling. It really frustrates me, and to put out mediocre products. They've used these particular
yes.
bandwagons and jumped on them. And there's a movie I'm reviewing next week, Sinners,
Yes. Yeah,
and
it's getting a lot of press here in the States.
everyone is unilaterally praising it as if it's the next Bram Stoker's Dracula,
Hmm.
and it's really not. It's all over the place. There's no
Mm.
coherent story there. It's because that's what I look at. I don't look at the bells and whistles. I look at pure storytelling.
Yeah.
That's one thing I appreciate about books. I love movies, always have. But with books, at least you don't have to worry about special effects, location shots, actors, actresses. You can actually just, if it's a good story, it's bare bones. It's right there. And you
Hmm.
either go with it or you don't. It either lands with
Right.
you or it doesn't. And it's. I find when you don't feel like it's a chore to read something, and you actually start to think about the character, you're involved in the story.
Yes, very much so. which is
And
what I hope happens with everyone who reads one of my novels, is that they're just going to keep turning those pages to see what happens next, you know.
I think you're doing it at a good time because, like I said, both the vampire and the werewolf genre has been so tame. It's
Yes.
nice. It really is refreshing. I was so glad when I started looking into your books. It's like somebody's got back to basics. God, we need that.
Hmm.
Just back to the
Yeah.
supernatural monsters. Yes, they exist in the modern world.
Mhm.
Yes, the questions are maybe the scientific elements, but back to them just being monstrous. The way I remember
Yep.
that's what inspired me when I was a kid. That I wasn't the top of the food chain. There were things out there bigger than me. It sort of kept you
Hmm.
humble, as a sense.
Yes. Keeps you humble and
Mm.
keeps you alert.
Yep,
You don't get complacent.
that's the most dangerous thing.
When yeah, complacency kills. Complacency kills. Literally kills. Um, but yeah, I I when I decided that I was moving from screenwriting to novels, I wanted to find a a niche that was either was not occupied at all or had very few people occupying it, right?
Mhm,
And I found that, and I decided to write the novels and write the stuff that no one else was writing. And that's where I came up with this idea of taking these classic monster archetypes, and rather than making them some one-dimensional cardboard cutout boogeyman, you know, that I would give them multifaceted personalities. I give them a backstory, give them strengths and weaknesses, good points and bad, curse them with a moral compass, and then drop them into situations where they have to make moral decisions to, get out of it.
yep.
And it's just not something that I'd seen a lot of. And so I've written two vampire novels. I've written two werewolf novels, and I'm going to be starting my third novel in the werewolf series in June,
Mhm.
and it's going to be the last one.
Oh,
I'd
so I
always
was going to
envisioned.
ask, have you got a story arc for each of these series? It's not a case of just trying to keep them going. Have you got a beginning, middle, end of the whole story?
For my werewolf trilogy, yes.
Hmm.
Each each novel is written in a three-act structure, and that's something I bring with me from writing
Yep.
screenplays. But each book serves as a first act, second act, and then third act for a larger overarching story about this world of werewolves. Uh, Now, as far as my vampire story, I plan to write at least one more, but the series is fundamentally different. In fact, I was just at a big convention a couple of weeks back, and I was at Crypticon over in Seattle, and I was
Hmm.
selling books over there. And what I told people about my vampire series was this: it's kind of like the James Bond franchise, where you have a returning main character, you have returning key support players, you know, but each story is its own story. It's very episodic,
Hmm.
right? They didn't really start doing direct sequels until the Daniel Craig era.
Sad Bond.
Uh, I like them up until that final movie, No Time to Die.
I
Uh,
couldn't even get past 5 minutes of it.
well,
See the
it
scene with the
just
ice. I'm just like, nah, I'm out.
yeah,
Um,
but yeah, the my vampire series is like that. So the third novel, I I know I want to do something. I don't know what it's going to be. Um, but the big thing is going to be after the events of the second novel. Um, is going to be figuring out which surviving characters I can bring back for a third, and actually make something work. You know, so that there's going to be a lot of planning and plotting and figuring out what will work and what won't work. And if I can come up with something that'll work, I'll write it.
Hmm.
If it's something, if I can't come up with something that I think is going to work, I won't even bother. I won't write it. I'll go write something else because I, God, I'm going to sound pretentious here, and I don't mean to sound this way, but um, I believe in quality over quantity.
Oh yeah,
I want to write. I want to write a damn good book that is going to keep people involved, keep them engaged, and keep them turning pages, rather than just crank some POS out every 9 to 12 months, whether it's any good or not. I I can't do that. I wouldn't know how to do it, even if I wanted to do it. I wouldn't know how.
no, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's not a bad or set of standards to have. Like I've been the project recently there because it just was not working.
Hmm.
It was a trilogy and it just wasn't coming together, wasn't enjoyable. Uh the story as well. I was trying to mix dark fantasy with horror, more in the horror bent, and it just was not. There are two things that it's very clear when you're in the fantasy genre, stay in your lane sort of thing. You
Yeah.
can have horror elements, but you have to stay in your lane or else you tear that whole story apart. And I
Right.
realized that
Right.
my own hubris could have went, well, then brilliant, I could do it. But when you actually realize, yeah, this is not working, just bin it, delete. There's something freeing about that because then you've got headspace to actually focus on something quality, and then another story's always rattling about in there. You probably find that as a creative anyway. You've always got that desire to put something out, to create something just for the sake of it, not even about fame and accolades or money. You just got that you want to
Mhm.
do something, you want to bring something from concept, the actual, creation.
Yes, absolutely. I it was funny you were mentioning about, killing something that just wasn't coming together. I had initially tried to write Nocturnal as a screenplay.
Hmm.
And the problem was is that I wrote like 60 pages of screenplay, and I realized I was still in my first act. And your first act has to be done by page 15 maybe. And I was 60 pages in and I hadn't gotten to act 2 yet, and I knew I was in trouble. And I was going to just delete the whole thing. And I was going through a rough time at the time. I had stage 4 throat cancer, which is not a fun thing to have. Take it from someone who's had cancer, folks. If you can avoid getting cancer, avoid getting cancer. Trust me on this one. You don't want it. Shit pisses you off, man. It really does.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
Um,
about that because obviously you've mentioned that ended your screenwriting career, but no, sorry, carry on what you're
mhm.
doing, then we can go back to that.
Yeah, it just all I can all I'll say, and this is my gallows humor coming in. Having cancer was not nearly as much fun as I had been led to believe it would be. it just it is just not something you want to have. God knows I don't want to ever have to face it again. We're both military men, so you'll understand what I'm about to say. I would rather, at 63 years old, I would rather be called back to active duty, put on a uniform, lace up my boots, have a shotgun shoved into my hand, and sent to the ass end of the world to hold the line with my Marines than to face cancer again. And the reason I would rather do that is at my age now, if I got sent into combat, I'll be lucky to last the day. I within a week I would be in a body bag, because at 63 years old, you cannot do the stuff you did when you were in your 20s and early 30s. It just doesn't work that way.
No, new
And
things break all the time. It's funny, isn't it? You get up every morning, it's like, oh, I didn't even know I had that, but why is it hurting?
yeah, yeah. You wake up and you go, why does my hair hurt today? You know, not that I have much left, but you understand what I'm saying. I mean, if I were to be called back up to active duty now, it's a death sentence for me, and we both understand what that is.
Yep.
I'd rather go out that way than having to die of cancer. That's Nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves to die like that. Mm-mm. No, no, no,
No,
no.
that's another thing in the world that reminds us we're not top of the food chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
You
something
know,
I think people have a part to part of a reason why I think a lot of these stories are now sanitized. For some reason in today's society, people have a hard time believing that they're not invincible.
well, that's something that you see in youth, which is one of the reasons why governments recruit for their military from teenagers. You know, they want teens and people in their early 20s, because when you're that age, you think you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, you know, and that's what they want. They can work with that. You know, as you get older, you start to find out that you're non 10 feet tall, you're not bulletproof, you are not invincible, you are not immortal, and no one else is either. And as you get older, you figure this stuff out. When you're young, um, you don't you don't think about that. You think you're going to live forever, and like I say, you think you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. You're like, oh, you want me to do this? Hell yeah. You want me to rappel off the side of this mountain here? Okay, let's do that. Oh, we're going to go out to the range and throw grenades? Cool, let's go do that. And that's why they recruit from the high school age and the young college age kids, is
I don't know.
because
I remember turning 30, and you remember you get an extra 30 seconds on your. I don't know if you do it over there, but you get an extra 30 seconds on your PFT.
uh yeah, after I turned 30, the times on my PFT changed
Yeah,
too.
you get an extra 30 seconds, and all of a sudden, for like 6 months, you're like, I'm super duper fit. I'm well under time. Whoa, and then your body catches up. You're like, oh, I need these 30 seconds now. Oh, right. There's a reason for that.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. Things just start
Yeah.
slowing down. It's the natural aging process. The nerve synapses don't fire as quickly. Muscle contractions don't happen as quickly. Um, you start, once you're in your like late 30s and early 40s, men start to produce less testosterone. We become a little bit less aggressive. Um, we start to lose muscle mass, whether we want to or not.
No,
Okay,
it's
we
all
start
part of it.
losing
Yeah.
muscle mass. Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the aging process. And you can delay it, but you can't beat it. You know, and so let's see, what are some of the other things I see
Yeah.
here.
Oh, it's just kind of went a wee bit. I think
Hmm.
everyone just listening, but all went, well, got a bit philosophical there, and everyone was just, I think, just shut up, man. Oh, right. Okay. They're in the zone.
Yeah, you got a couple of guys talking, a couple of guys who are getting old talking about guys who are getting old.
Yeah. That's,
But the
I,
great thing about talent, artistic talent, is that it doesn't know an age. You see it. with writers, you see it, certainly see it with novelists. They'll be they'll be publishing when they're in their 70s and 80s, if they're healthy enough to sit in front of a laptop and work. They're gonna keep producing the work as long as there's an audience for it.
Yep.
Look at
Or more,
Stephen
I
King.
wouldn't say so much
The
an
man is
audience,
still,
more
the
desire to
man
do
is.
it. Would you not say?
Say again?
Not so much as there's always an audience, but I think there has to be a desire to do it. I think it has to be a
Yes.
fundamental drive.
Yeah. Something we were talking about before we went live here is that I talked about the 10-year-old kid who looks inside the inside of the space shuttle and looks at all the buttons and switches and just goes, "Wow." I still have that 10-year-old kid inside me. I still have that 10-year-old kid who wrote his first 3-page short story, because that's when I started, was when I was 10. And somehow or another, through all the ups and downs, out of all the stuff that's happened to me over the course of my life, somehow I have managed to not let that 10-year-old kid who started writing just for the pure joy of it, I've never let that kid die. He's still in there. And that's why I'm able to do what I do at, at 63 years old. And I don't hide from my age. Hell, I'm proud of it.
Yeah,
A
it's just
lot of
right.
my friends, a lot of my friends, they didn't get to be this age because I had to put a lot of my friends into body bags.
Yeah, obviously where I grew up and during the times, a lot of people decided don't want to be around anymore, and that's another massive thing with the forces too. There's
Yeah.
this sort of fuck it
Yeah.
attitude, it's like just reach one day and go, nah, don't give a shit anymore, done, and there's no warning. Next thing you know, someone else is
A lot
gone.
of
You're
times
like,
not. Well, military men, and you'll understand this, we are trained to not ask for help
no, it's all about
because,
self-reliance. It's you're asking for help.
yeah,
You're not being a team player. You're not a good squad member. You're
you're showing weakness.
Yep.
If you do that, you're showing weakness. You're showing, and that's how certainly in the military, it's how it's looked at. And here in America, um, that's how it's looked at for men in general. Men don't talk about their feelings because sure as shit, when we do, somebody somewhere is going to turn it around and use it against us.
Oh yeah, that's you're just opening the door.
Uh, if you try, they go, "Oh, talk about your problems." And then you talk about your problems and people are going, "What the hell are you talking about?" You know? Shut up, tough it up, continue to march. That's what they, that's
Well, we were
that's
also.
the
I don't want to hear
message you
problems. I
get
want to
back.
hear solutions.
Yeah,
That was always
yeah,
something beaten into me. I don't want to hear your problems. I want to hear solutions.
yeah.
And that
And
was just
to that,
you took that on board.
yeah, I did take that on board. And what I used to do when I was active duty was, because I learned that real quick too, that the officers in charge didn't want you to come with something that they had to solve. So I would go to an officer in charge or whoever it was, and I'd say, "Sir, we have a situation. Here is the situation, and then here is what I propose, respectfully, sir or ma'am. This is what I propose we do to resolve this situation." And a lot of times they'd think for a minute and they go, "Sounds good, Petty Officer Allen. You go ahead and you go take care of that." "Yes, sir," or "Yes, ma'am." And then I'd walk out and they never knew that what they told me to go do, I had already done it. I was just giving them the courtesy of letting them know that there was a situation,
Yeah.
you know? And I'll tell you what, I got a whole lot more mileage professionally that way, because instead of me being a problem guy, I was a problem solver guy. And a lot of times, the only thing I needed them was to either know it, or the problem that needed to be fixed at a level of the chain of command that I had no authority to approach directly. Like maybe it was something at the company level or at the battalion level. Well, that wasn't really something I could do. But I could go to a company commander and say, yeah, here's a situation. I can't fix this myself. I'm going to need your help to get this done. And that was okay too. What they never wanted was for me to come in and say, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, this is terrible." Ah! They didn't want that. They wanted, here's a situation. Here's my proposal on how to fix it. And that they would deal with.
Yeah, we were kind of from pot NCOs onwards. That was it. The minute you even picked up your first strike, that's what you're always taught. You're only one build away from being a commander, so you must learn. Fix the problems. Everyone must be a problem solver. No room for passengers. And obviously, British Army, we're a lot smaller. We're compared to a lot of the armies in the world, we're tiny, so we can't afford huge echelons of people who can't solve problems with no room for passengers. So everyone from boot camp onwards, you're basically ready to go. Like even recruit training, you're trained as a section commander. Everyone does their appointment. That's it. They don't bring in NCOs to lead you. You lead yourselves as a section. That's the smallest unit.
Right.
And that's the way everyone's trained. Is it one bullet away, you're a section commander, so you must be from the get-go a problem solver, a leader.
Yeah.
And that's it. You just have that sort of attitude. I've done cross training with you guys, and I always find that fascinating that you could afford to have so many people that just didn't think.
Well, we're
had to be told what to
we're
do.
such a large populous country, and we have so much land mass. And over the last century or so, as Americans, we have become so intimately involved in so many wars and conflicts all over the world. And typical government and government thinking is and military thinking too is, you establish a base in a foreign land, and it's like, well, since we're here, we're going to stay. And let's stay here for the next 70, 80, 100 years, because, we're in this place now, and strategically, we're not that far away from this enemy nation over here. If we have this base here, then we can watch them more closely. Now, the situation with that is, the more bases you have, the more people you need in your military to man those bases. So
Yeah, and then you get your stag monkeys. That's all it is. Guard the gates.
Oh yeah. You got people at least in our military. There are people there that about all they can do, really. And I don't mean this in a bad way. It's just the way it is. Some of them, all they can really do is push a broom. That's all they can do. Luckily, the military is real big on cleanliness, so you're always going to need some broom pushers. So even those people can have a function in the military, and they can do their time, get out, and they can walk away knowing that they did their one tiny little part to support the nation. And they can walk away and have a measure of pride with that. and that's great. We all need to have a favorable impression of ourselves.
No, that's you're better doing something than nothing. It's the people that refuse, think they're owed something in the world, and they'll do nothing. Like you see that as well. Back to writing again. Have you seen the number of people that join writing groups that have no intention of writing a thing, but they join every forum, every group, and they always have an opinion?
Yes,
And like, where's
yes.
your stuff? I'm working on this, and it's like, why are you here? And they're always loud. They're never passive. It's a
The
strange.
ones with
I
the
never
least,
understood that. Maybe it is the military background. Maybe it's you got to go to, if you're going to do something, do it. No in buts, if buts or maybes, no in betweens. You go for it full throttle. But I never understood these people that they hang around creatives, they join the groups, they join the forums, and this is definitely a social media age thing. They've no intention themselves of actually producing or even trying, but they're quick to jump on people and criticize and tear down. And uh,
well,
I'm antithesis to that
oftentimes the people
mentality.
who
I
speak
absolutely
the
despise it.
loudest, yeah, oftentimes I find the people who speak the loudest are the ones that have the least to say. Um, and yeah, I find it difficult to take writing advice or publishing advice or marketing or advertising advice um, from someone who has never written a book, has never had to put one out there, has never gone through the trial by fire that is, the marketing uh, of your work. I find it difficult to take those people seriously when they try to tell me how to do my job.
Yeah, it's
And yes, writing is a calling and it's a talent and all that, but it's a job like any other job, and you gotta you gotta drink your coffee and get your butt up out of bed, and you've got to sit down and go to work, and that's what it takes.
and
If you're
people
going to
don't
be a
understand
professional,
that.
that's what it
Yeah,
takes.
yeah, you got to actually knuckle down, and you can't
Hmm.
pipe dream your way to being a it's this idea, and I use the word a lot. What I mean. I think being creative is very important. It's part of the human condition. It's what makes us different from the rest of the animal kingdom. It's what sets us
Yes.
apart and makes us aspire to be better. But there's people who think being a creative is just navel gazing,
Yeah.
and they don't
Yeah.
produce anything tangible, but they want the. And we're not. We just yap. You know what I mean? We're just ordinary people. We just yap and we talk. It's there's no great mistake. And I,
Yeah.
I like that more of deal with other writers and other podcasters. Not there's no great mistake. We all just sort of go, "Oh, do you remember that thing went wrong?" And this, like, look at this. This podcast went wrong. I don't know where the hell my cameras went, but you just got to crack on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You
That's
do.
that's something you just
You make the
encounter.
best of it. Uh, do you dilute your writing to fit in with what places like Horror Association and their censorship? No. In fact, hey, Colin, can I cuss on this show?
Fuck yeah.
Okay, good. Uh, Thank you for asking the question,
See
Dell. I'm
if
going to
if
give
you
you the
want to
answer.
see the most cursing in an episode, check out my The Crow 2024 review.
Ooh,
That
okay.
was
Yeah, I'll
40
have to
minutes.
look for
That
that
was
one.
45 minutes of me going, fucking bastards, you cunts, you fuckers, I hate you. How the fucking dare you
Okay.
put this thing together? And that was me for 45 minutes.
Okay. To answer Dell's questions, do I dilute my writing? Not only no, but hell no, shit no, fuck no. Nobody, and I mean nobody, tells me what I can and cannot write. Fuck that. Fuck them. Hell no. There's a reason why the word independent is in my job description as an independent horror writer. No one tells me what I can and cannot write.
Yeah.
And now I don't know about the Horror Association has never tried to limit me or censor me or anything. I haven't run into anything like that yet with them.
Dell, without going and telling her story for her, Dell's had people
Um,
deliberately try to put her head away and actually dilute her work. And there's certain elements that have been trying to actually, okay, you can't use the word madness anymore because it's against people's mental health. You can't use the word lunatic anymore. You can't say this. You can't say the word kill. It's like, fuck off. That's the whole point of horror genres.
yeah,
They actually explore
the
the
horror the
darkest
horror genre
elements.
the horror genre is not politically correct. The horror genre is not a safe space. It is anti-politically correct. It is an anti-safe space. Horror as a genre is supposed to be dangerous. It's supposed to be subversive. It should art well, horror, like any art form, should disturb the comfortable
Yep.
and it should comfort the disturbed. And I believe in that with all my heart and being. Art is not safe. It's not supposed to be. All true art breaks a boundary somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is obvious. Sometimes it's a bit more subtle and nuanced. But this, yeah, art is not safe.
And
And
horror
I
is
got to give
primal.
the attribution to that quote that came from film director Rob Zombie. Art is not safe.
I feel sorry for Rob Zombie. He's one of the few genuine people out there. He genuinely does
Yeah,
what he wants to do. But God,
yeah.
he
Rob
has done
Zombie,
some
what you see
stinkers.
is what you get.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
has. He's really went out there with some of his movies. Like House of a Thousand Corpses, I think was amazing. The sequel's a bit lackluster. Not, I think he'd done the story enough in the first one, and it kind of felt a
Mhm.
bit egged on. But what was that one? 31 or 13,
The
one about the
Devil's
record. Oh, the Devil Rejects and Three from Hell. Yeah, the sequels they're all right, but they weren't in the same power. But some of his other movies he's done, and oh my god, what he did to the monsters is just no, please.
I liked what he did with the first Halloween. I saw the director's cut of that movie, not the one that played in theaters. Completely different films. Okay,
I need to go back to that.
and the the uh, the director's cut of Rob Zombie's Halloween is really just bone chilling because it's the classic textbook progression of a child sociopath who is progressing through those stages to actually wind up becoming what he becomes
Yep.
a serial killer, a mass murderer, and a serial killer. And because I know something about the psychology of psychopaths, and I've read, actual textbooks about it, about what makes them different from the rest of us. Um, I was able to pick out the stuff in the elements of that in that movie, and Zombie got it right. That's the thing. His script got it right. The studio version was a complete recut of his movie, and there were
Sanitization, you could
plot
almost say.
holes. Yeah, you could drive a semi tractor through some of the plot holes. They were so big, but in the director's cut, it's a like I say, it's the second half is a completely different movie, and yeah, that movie gets maligned a lot, and I think it's because the only thing people ever saw was the theatrical version. And since his name is director, he gets blamed for it. But the director's
Well, sure,
version.
the
In fact,
same
I
thing
would
happened with
say this
Clive
about
Barker with
most
Nightbreed.
films. I like the director's version of Nightbreed
The Cabal cut.
better than the theatrical.
Yeah. Or have you seen the Cabal cut where they actually put the actual quality changes because they put all the rough stuff.
I don't
So
think I've seen
there's
that
three
one.
cuts. There's obviously the theatrical cut, which was terrible. The director's cut, which
Yeah.
does a bit more. Then there's the Cabal cut, which actually has even more footage in it, but the footage is so raw that the actual quality of the movie changes. But the story's there,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that's another example of bloody studios not understanding the horror genre and being
Right.
afraid of it. No,
Yeah.
well, actually, Rob Zombie's
Yeah.
a good example of somebody else who's unapologetic, actually, and he'll be talked about for
Yeah.
well after he's
For
gone. His work will
for
last
better
longer than
or
he
for
does.
worse, his films are his films. Now,
Yep.
I think the quality, when you look at his total body of work, I believe the quality is uneven. I mean, he hits as many times as he misses, but it's always interesting to see what he's going to do and to see what is he trying to do. You know,
Mhm.
what target is he trying to hit? And a lot of times that's just as interesting as to whether or not he hits or misses.
So let's talk. You were a screenwriter, or was a producer? Wasn't it? Was that the role you had, producer?
I've done a little bit of everything in the film industry.
Mhm.
I primarily I thought of myself as a screenwriter. Directed a film. I've helped produce a few, you know, where I just kind of put money into the budget and stuff. But primarily, I always saw myself as a writer. In fact, I saw myself as a failed screenwriter because in I started learning how to write screenplays in 1995,
Mhm.
and um, I just decided to make a clean break from the film world this year in 2025. So
That soon.
I tried I tried to create a long-term sustainable and self-sustaining career in the film industry, and I tried for 30 years. And I whatever it was that I had, the market just was not interested in. And I would ask my agents. I mean, I'd be good enough to get agents and managers and stuff like this,
Mhm.
and I would say, "Why are we not selling?" And I would say the first thing I think of is it's a bad screenplay, and be like, "No, Mark, if it was, we'd tell you." Well, maybe I just suck as a writer. Well, no, Mark, that's not it either, because if you sucked as a writer, we would not be representing you, you know. And so it just whether it was bad timing or whatever it was, I know one thing. Out of the 8 or 9 credits that I have on my IMDb, only 3 of them are for writing.
Mhm.
Um, I wrote Restitution, which I also produced and directed back in 2007. I wrote and co-produced Early Grave, which came out in 2013. And then I wrote, and all I did was write, came out last year, a revenge thriller called Restitution. And, but I just could not, whatever it was, I, whether it was bad timing or it was the producers that they were trying to sell to or whatever the deal was, I don't know. The only thing I know for sure is I wrote a pilot and 10 episodes for a television series. And I wrote the entire first season. And I wrote the series Bible. I wrote all these supporting documentations and stuff. And I sent it to my manager, last manager I had, and we tweaked it around, we went over it, and we got it to where we both loved it. And she went to Netflix with it. She went to Amazon Prime. I think she went to Apple TV and a couple of other places like Cinemax and that kind of thing. And nobody would touch it for two reasons. And both of these reasons I understand. One, it was going to be very heavy for makeup, special effects makeup, and just special effects.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a very expensive show to do. That and the fact that as a television writer, I had no experience. I was an unknown quantity, and they just, because it was going to be so expensive, they could not take the risk. Now, that I can understand. That I get.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as all the other feature films that we tried to get set up, and these were feature films that were going to be very modest budgets, five, there was one that I think we were going to do for around $2.5 million. There was another one we were looking at doing for like five to seven. I mean, these are, small cast, limited locations, straight ahead, character driven stories, right? And one of them was going to be the first movie in what we thought would be a franchise, because I had a completely new monster that had never been seen before and was based on Native American folklore and legend. But whatever the deal was, we could never get anything set up. And so now, see, here's the thing. Now that I'm writing my novels completely and I'm not in the film industry anymore, I have all these unproduced screenplays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what I can do? They're still mine. I
Yep.
wrote them. I created the characters. I own the copyrights. So I can take those screenplays and look at them as nothing more than finely detailed outlines for a book. Because, I mean, what is a screenplay if it's not a very detailed outline to make a movie with? Well, I'm just going to turn around and use it as an outline to start writing novels.
That's a classic
Nothing says I
example.
can't do that.
Yep. No, that's a classic example of what I say is no time creating is wasted time. Even if it's just
No,
learning.
I agree.
A
I
lot of people
agree.
get hung up, and that's something I try to challenge on this podcast, particularly for people that are just starting out, to think that unless they're going to create a bestseller immediately, it's not worth time doing it. And it seems to be a major mental block. When you see people chattering and so forth, they worry more about the success and actually getting down and creating in the first place. And even
Yeah.
if something fails or doesn't take off in one format, you don't know where you're going to be 5 years down the line. And just by going through the process of creating, you're learning as well. You're taking concepts, you're putting them into form, you're making mistakes, but you're also learning from the mistakes, and then you get better.
Yeah.
It's never time
Hopefully.
wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully you're learning from your mistakes and you're getting better. Hopefully you are. Yeah. And, but like this television series, what I realized was that I can take that and out of those 10 screenplays, because a lot of them were like 2-part episodes,
Mhm.
um, I can take those 10 and I can write 5 or 6 novels out of it and just have a whole new series.
Yep.
The same thing. I've got a couple of screenplays that would be standalone novels, right? And that's fine. But this Native American thing I was talking about, that's another trilogy, because I had planned that and conceived it to be a trilogy of feature films.
Mhm.
Well, It never sold. So, and this is a movie that could have been done for like 5 million, $7 million, and that would have gotten horror stars in it, you know. And my manager at the time actually had some horror actors in her on her client list,
Hmm.
and she and I had thought, well, hey, let's tweak this part for this actor, we'll tweak that part for that actor, we'll get these actors in, and we'll be able to go get the money. And since we're keeping our budget low, we get it into theaters, and you know, uh, it'll go into profits quickly because people in the horror community will come to see these actors simply because they're in a movie that's playing in theaters.
Well, it's funny that the horror
And
genre
it just didn't work.
kept the
It
movies
just did
going
not work.
over the last couple of years. Every other genre has been tanking and losing money hand over fist. But the horror
Mhm.
genre over the last 5 years has kept the theater doors open. I just think that's hilarious. There's an irony in it, considering the fact that most other genres thumb their nose down at horror. Ew, it's only horror. Ew, it's it's low rent, it's low ability.
Oh yeah, they consider it to be like almost as like one step above porn,
Yeah.
you know. And I understand where that comes from because let's face it, there's a lot of really bad horror that gets made. People who think that it's just about the blood and guts. They don't have a story. They don't have engaging characters. There's no subtext. There's no meaning to any of the kills. You get these people who think that they can uh, gather 70 or 80 pages of script and set up all these kills, but there's no emotional impact. It doesn't mean anything. Movies like that, I used to try to sit through those movies. Movies like that now, I don't even bother with them. I turn them off. Life is too short to watch bad horror
Mm.
or to read bad books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Life is just too short.
Yeah, and that's fine. But at the same time, the horror genre being that vast that they're only a blip in the radar. You know what I mean? There's uh they don't hold the whole genre because there's just as many impactful movies and movies that have like a 20-year lifespan are still being talked about, the classics.
Mhm. Yeah.
So the other side of the coin is yes, there's a lot of guff out there, but then it's still just a drop in the ocean. Even
Yeah.
the fads and the trends, still don't make a dent. They don't take over the whole genre. They tend to just be a blip in the radar. Horror is just too big,
Hopefully. Yeah,
which I'm
I think
grateful for.
because
I'm grateful that it's that size.
it's such a large tent,
Mm.
horror. It's such a large tent, that it's easy to include, uh, a whole lot of different aspects of the genre. I mean, there's even aspects of the genre that don't appeal to me. Um, and whether it's a generational thing or it's yeah, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's all subjective. I mean, your work either resonates with people or it doesn't. And it'll resonate with these few people over here, but it won't resonate with these people over here, and that's fine. I don't, I don't question that. And there are some things within horror that don't resonate with me. However, having said that, they're still just as legitimate as what I do. And I do believe that there's room for everyone at the horror table. You know what I
And
mean?
I think that's the
There's
fundamental difference about the genre compared to other genres. There is
Mhm.
room for everybody at the table to do something different. Others, like sci-fi, for example, you're very locked in to a particular type of story. Fantasy,
Yeah,
you're locked into a
yeah.
type of story. Rom-coms, you're locked into exactly formulaic type of story. You know what I mean? There's
Oh, man,
other
don't get me
genres
started
feel
on
very
rom-coms. God.
hmm?
I said, "Oh, just yeah, don't Don't get me started about rom-coms, man.
Yeah, but
I've
here's the
seen a
difference,
few
though.
that I like, but
Yep,
by and large, I detest them for the reasons that you just said.
yep,
Formulaic.
yep. Right, step by step, paint by numbers. But however, as a horror fan, do you create a fake account, go into rom-com fans' pages, and tell them how terrible their genre is?
No,
Why do they
I
do
don't
it
have
to
time
us?
for that kind of stuff. That's
Yeah, but you know what I mean?
that's just
That is a complete
childish.
waste of time and energy. But why do they do it to us?
Mm. Um, it's that poke what we call poking the bear,
Mm.
like you get a stick and you find a sleeping bear in the woods, you get a stick and you start poking at them. They're just trying to poke the bear. They're just trying to get a reaction. And if you react to it, you're actually doing what they want you to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
And
just
so my thing is I'll just say, "Hey, if you don't like horror, that's fine." There's lots of people out there who do. They are my audience and you're not.
yeah. And this is back to the sanitization. All these tourists come in and they say, "Oh, you can't be doing that. You can't be doing this,"
Yeah.
and you're like, "Why are you here?" The clue's in the name.
Yeah.
The name is
And like
deliberately restrictive to let you know what you're in for.
yeah. And like look at the covers of any of my novels. Look at the covers of
Oh,
all of my body of work. You will have absolutely no illusion whatsoever about what these books are about and what you're going to find inside,
like Nocturnal,
and
like there's no messing about with that. That's
yeah,
not a sparkly vampire.
no, that is not a
There's
sparkly
no
vampire.
sparkles there whatsoever.
Nope. The closest thing to a subdued cover that I've done was for Just Before Dawn, where I have a photo of my vampire running away from your point of view, running down a darkened street, and that was simply because I couldn't find anything else that I liked, and that was what I came up with. But like with Blood Red Moon, the first of my werewolf trilogy, the werewolf is coming out of the darkness at you with his fangs bared and red eyes. You can't pick that up and go, "Oh, this is going to be women's fiction."
Yeah.
No. Now, nothing against women's fiction, but you cannot look at that cover, and you certainly can't look at the cover of Alpha Male
Nope, that thing's gonna
and
tear you apart.
and and think that it is anything other than what it is, because I believe in truth in advertising. I want people to know exactly what they're getting in for when they pick up a Mark Allen novel. And just within a few pages of opening it and starting to read, I want it to be so distinctive. I want my voice to be so distinctive, my writer's voice, that they go, "Oh yeah, this is definitely a Mark Allen novel." That's what I'm striving for.
That is always something I know for a fact. If I see New York Times bestseller in front of a novel, it's going to be generic. You pick, doesn't matter who the author is. You pick one up and it has that stamp on the front. It's going to be the same pro. Like you can't tell the voices apart.
Right, because
But
the Times and all the big newspapers here, um, they have established relationships with the big publishing houses, just like they have established relationships with the big movie studios in Hollywood, and they are going to make room for whatever author the big houses are foisting up as this is one of our marquee writers. Um, as an independent author, I don't have that luxury, so I'm just going to come at you with honesty, and one of two things will happen: either people are going to be drawn to it, or just based on the cover, or they will be repelled by it. And that's actually what I'm going for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want to waste mine giving a pitch to someone who's never ever going to buy it. But at the same time, I don't want to waste their time either, because their time is just as valuable as mine is.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. So what is it about the genre? Just I know we've been on this for a while, but what is it about the horror genre in general that just inspires you, that actually draws you to it, that makes you want to go down that path?
Oh, that's an easy answer. And this may actually be a good place to wrap things up.
Hmm.
I'm very passionate about this. Horror, within the confines of the genre, and there are some confines that you can push over and go beyond, and then there's others that you want to stay within, and it all depends on the story that you're telling. But within the conventions of the genre, which are rather broad, you have an endless opportunity for massive creativity, artistic creativity. You can tell so many stories. You can talk about so many things as long as you understand subtext and how to write it and when to use it and when not to use it and that kind of thing. Um, you can tell all kinds of stories, and I will be working within the horror genre the rest of my life. I mean, I joked with someone the other day that when I die, I'm probably going to die at my desk, my fingers hovering over my keyboard, and it's not a bad way to go. But I can work in horror the rest of my life, and I'll never tell the same story twice.
Yeah,
And that's for me as
completely
an
hear you on that.
artist, that is just thrilling to me that I can do that. And like that 10-year-old kid that still lives inside of me and is just going, wow, I get to do this. Is this cool or what? You know?
Yep.
And I'm still there. That sense of wonder of what I can do within this genre. It continues unabated. And I hope it continues unabated forever. I never want this enthusiasm and this sense of wonderment that I have. I never want that to go away. I never want that 10-year-old kid that's inside me to die. I never want him to die.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel the same way. I think that's why we tend to gel so well. And yeah, like I said, it's just a completely different culture in horror.
Mhm.
I think
Dell,
it is because of that. Yeah, sorry, just seeing fillers. Glad to see you, man. Thanks for saying
hey
hello.
Phil, I see here where Dell is contributing. Horror feeds are primordial need to survive. Absolutely, Dell. You're
Hmm.
hitting the nail on the head. Since we are no longer prey, jump scares are the way to get that feeling back. Absolutely. It's the same reason that people go to amusement parks and ride roller coasters. There is something very primal within all humans. We need that. We need that thrive of adrenaline. We need it. And modern society has been built in such a way to take as much of that out of our daily lives. And whether you are going to an amusement park to ride a roller coaster, whether you are bungee jumping, scuba diving, swimming with sharks, uh, racing a motor car, we do all of these things to put us as close to death as we can without actually dying, you
Hmm.
know? And with roller coasters and with going to horror movies, it's fun to be scared, to feel that adrenaline. But way back here in the back of our heads, our logic tells us that we're not in any real danger. And that's what makes it fun. Because being in real danger, where you are in very, very real danger of getting killed, let me tell you, I can tell you that that is not
You will
fun. It is not thrilling.
you
You
will
know, it's
shovel yourself into the ground with your hands and scoop and dig your own trench quicker than you can.
yeah,
As soon as your belt buckle hits the ground, you're like, shit.
yeah, it's the 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 fake stuff is fun. And when you make the choice to do something dangerous, that's thrilling and that's fun. And biochemically, it's the same thing when you sit in a horror film. It's the adrenaline, it's the rush, it's the pulse racing, it's your blood pressure going up. You get that heightened sense of awareness of what's around you, and that's a very primal uh, thing in us. It's all part of our instinct to survive. You know,
No, well, Mark,
so
it's absolutely fantastic. This has been a pleasure. Of course, everyone, links in the description to Mark's author page. Go check out his work. And obviously, we'll keep up to date. Don't forget as well, if you've anything coming out, let us know. We've got a weekly newsletter. Of course, we'll let everyone know what's coming up. But that just seems to say, thanks very much, Mark, for being here. Thanks for everybody in the chat. And until next
it
time,
was my pleasure.
my pleasure too. Glad to have you. And until next time, keep updated with the channel, do the type of clicky things, and remember to keep it creepy, keep it horrific.